Hello everybody, Zukonima here again with another Fire Emblem trailer analysis. The E3 trailer was shown at Nintendo's digital event, and there is so much hidden in this trailer, along with information from Famitsu, and the information trailer released in Japan. So buckle in folks, this one is probably going to be the longest one yet. Also, there is a note here for potential spoilers, if I get my predictions correct, so beware. To start off the trailer, Aqua appears to be walking into the lake that we've seen in previous trailers, only this time, instead of being on a balcony or a deck, she's walking directly into the water. We also see a slight tear on her face before it cuts away, but we're going to be covering more on this later. The following footage is also from previous trailers, but we now have context with the English dub. Our Nohr king here, Corrin, is clearly taken away the avatar from his father. We even have footage from the Japanese trailer showing this explicitly happening, and the dialogue just cements this conclusion.
You are my child now.
I forgot to mention that Aqua's name was actually localized to Azura. We actually get to hear Azura's song in English during the trailer, and here are the lyrics.
You are the ocean's great waves, destined to seek life beyond the shore, just out of reach. Yet the waters ever change, flowing like time. The path is yours to try.
You are my child now.
I can't make out this word because of the arrows being shot, and it's kind of difficult to even piece together what that word is because it could really be anything. But overall, the song is most likely about Corrin, our avatar unit, and it'll probably have much more context once we actually have the game in our hands and can piece together what specific event she's going to be talking about. Moving on from old footage into completely new footage, we see a deeply hooded figure with a concealed face plant a sword into the ground, causing a huge purple vortex space thingy that explodes inside the Hoshido capital. We know this is the Hoshido capital because of the attire of the citizens and the architecture. A note about his sword, though, is that we have not seen it at all before. Neither Max nor Ryuma uses this sword, and it appears to be covered in obsidian or a black substance. The wielder does not have typical Nohr or Hoshido attire, which leads me to believe he's part of a mysterious third faction or acting independently. Of course, it is completely possible that he is an agent of Nohr. It is extremely likely that Hoshido would blame Nohr for this attack. This event is probably also the catalyst for the main conflict in the game. It is worthy to note that Sakura yells for her mother, the Queen of Hoshido, after the explosion. It is extremely likely that she died in that explosion, and almost confirmed that she dies during the prologue, based off dialogue that was shown in the treehouse, saying that she sacrificed herself to save Corrin. This probably happens during the same chapter of these explosions based off the setting of Sakura yelling for her mother, and further dialogue explains that Corrin's sword seemed to be responsible for innocent Hoshidan deaths, and asks Corrin if he planned for this to happen. Of course Corrin says no, but now this places him as a suspect. It is even possible that the sword used by Corrin and the sword used by the hooded man are the same blade. The handles look almost identical, but they have a different aura around them. The possibilities are crazy, and we're going to go more into this later. Another translation and localization note I forgot to mention is that Max/Marx has now been localized to Xander. We see Xander and Ryuma both drawing their swords in these scenes. Xander's sword features a gem at the center, and two blades that arc to form one. It may just be the lighting here, but it seems that one blade is white and the other is black. Very interesting, as I stated in my previous video, that duality will be a prevalent theme of the game. He's drawing his sword in Nohr, as we see the emblems on the wall that match the Nohr flag and icon, and it is the same setting from the previous trailer. This is probably the key battle and cinematic when you're fighting against Xander if you choose to side with Hoshido. Now Ryuma's sword does not appear to have a central piece in the center like Xander's. As he draws it, we see that this location of battle is Hoshido. We can tell this by looking at the walls and architecture. We also see the same location later in the trailer, but once again we have to go into that later. There is so much later on that happens in this trailer that pieces things together, so be patient. The trailer switches from cinematics to gameplay, and we see a Hoshidan assault on a Nohr castle. In this shot we also see a Platin. There's not much of note here, but in the next shot we get another look at Hoshidan fan magic, this time a fire-type spell with a bull. But upon further inspection, this little spell he casts has extreme detail. Once again, more later on. The next shot is very intriguing. We see Corrin activate his Dragon Fang skill. Looking at his face, he seems to be a hybrid of a human and a dragon, and his skill summons a mouth that launches a projectile. This skill is not set at the beginning of the game, so he probably gets it later on. Another note is that Corrin's sword. During the Nintendo Treehouse, he received Ganglari, a dark ominous blade that I was talking about earlier, but in this shot he's using what appears to be a light version of the sword. By looking at the dialogue presented during the Treehouse Live event, Corrin claims that Ganglari exploded in his hands, so this sword of light must be a different blade. Maybe it's the anti-sword to the Ganglari. But wait, there's more. In the Hoshido and Nohr footage shown in trailers before, we see Corrin with a sword called Yato. We have seen this sword in trailers before, but have no idea of its origins or how you attain it. It just seems to be a special weapon for you to use until you probably re-encounter the more plot-heavy legendary swords like the Ganglari, or this Sword of Light that we don't know the name of. We once again see some brief scenes from trailers before delving into a new shot of a giant plume of lava emerging from the ground in a Nohr castle. But is it a Nohr castle? I don't really see an emblem of Nohr anywhere in this image. Could this possibly be a safe hold of a third faction? We also get a quick shot of Leon, who has now been localized to Leo, and Xander getting shocked at something. They seem to be in Hoshido, as the background is kinda dark, but the window design in the back seems to suggest it. Afterwards, we see Garen in great pain. He has no wounds. It's really hard to pin down what's happening in this scene without context. Maybe this is his defeat pose? I have no idea. We once again see Tsubaki threatening you. And as GameXplain pointed out in their last analysis, this scene appears to take place in Nohr based off the architecture. In the next shot, we see Azura getting corrupted or hurt by a substance similar to that of the explosion shown early on in the trailer. She is telling someone not to look at her, and it's a safe assumption that she's talking to Corrin. The scene also appears to take place at the same lake as earlier in the trailer. But what is the cause of this corruption? I'm placing my bets on this hooded figure, who directly appears in the next scene shooting projectiles with a similar affinity to the corruption on Azura. How this happens, I don't know, that's speculation. But this hooded man also seems to be the same one who planted the sword that caused the explosion. We also know that this scene of him shooting these projectiles takes place directly after the explosion, based off the debris and Hoshido buildings in the background. We then quickly go over some more footage we've seen before, concluding with Leo threatening to kill Corrin, presumably as the punishment for treason. In the next clip, we see Ryuma in a very bad position. He's sweating, looks tired and exhausted, but he's very angry. We are actually in the same setting as the previous clip that I talked about earlier, where Ryuma is preparing to attack. This current clip is probably right after you manage to get Ryuma into a defeat position, but it appears he'll have a last stand. Another thing to consider is that in the introduction trailer released in Japan, we have another clip in the exact same setting of Ryuma preparing to fight. How is there two clips of the exact same action? Maybe he fights you differently, or maybe you fight him regardless of what route you choose. Once again, we hit the wall of speculation. We then get dialogue from Elise, your little sister from Nohr, who, based on her dialogue, is probably providing you with her last words. She's crying, her words are stumbly, and she looks pretty dead. It's impossible to tell which route this is on. Though. In the next shot, things take a drastic turn. Corrin is inside a huge purple laser beam and screaming intensely. This is most likely him transforming into a dragon for the first time, as we see him start to develop dragon-like parts. This also takes place in the Hoshidan capital, as we can tell by the buildings, but there's already debris around the city, so this must take place after the huge explosion caused by the hooded figure. This huge explosion must lead to a series of events that leads Corrin to transform. Possibly that trigger event could be the death of his birth mother? Also going back to Dragon Fang, I believe this is the point where you gain that ability. Based off a screenshot shown from the Amazon listing, we see Corrin with this ability fighting against units of Hoshido. We know this screenshot takes place after the prologue because of the presence of units seen only in the Hoshido version. The logical place for him to get this ability is when he transforms into a dragon. To conclude the trailer, but not even get close to concluding this analysis, we have a scene of an injured Azura saying that Corrin in his dragon form can kill her, but only if he does it as himself. This implies that Corrin is not in control of his dragon form, as Game Explain and Vincent ASM over at Seren's Forest have previously suggested. The location of this scene was kinda hard to pin down, but I believe it is directly after his transformation based off the fountain in the background, debris, and slanted roofs in the background. Right after your transformation, you most likely have no control over your ability and go crazy. This is supported by the fact that Corrin is choking Aqua, but I believe the context is completely different than what we have seen in the previous trailer, where that is happening in the water. Another thing to note is Aqua's pendant, once again, is glowing. I strongly believe this item is either the Fire Emblem or closely tied to attaining the Fire Emblem. There has been too much emphasis on this item, and it's the only object that has been shown in the trailers that fits the usual criteria and description of a Fire Emblem. Some more information has been revealed from Nintendo's E3 showing for Fire Emblem Fates, and let's start with that. Fire Emblem If has been localized to Fire Emblem Fates, with the two versions being called Fire Emblem Fates Birthright for Hoshido and Fire Emblem Fates Conquest for Nohr. The games will release in 2016 in the West, and we have confirmation that it will be in 2 separate versions. There was also an information trailer released in Japan for Fire Emblem If. I'm not going to go over the entire thing, but I'm going to select small clips that I believe are quite relevant. During this info trailer, we see Azura in a water-filled environment that is extremely similar to a space found during the first trailer. This leads me to believe that there is some kind of otherworldly realm beyond just the continent that Hoshido and Nohr are on. This is further supported that King Garen says the Ganglari has been blessed from another world. On a similar note, we have information on a great god called Anankos. King Garen asks for Anankos' wisdom and looks up at a mural on the ceiling. Upon further inspection of this mural statue thingy, I don't know what to call it, I can see horns sprouting from its head. And in the background, we also see a spiral-like pattern that deeply reminds me of the official artwork. Another place I saw this pattern appear was in the purple explosion. It's a pretty loose connection though, but it could mean more than we think. Back to the horns sprouting from his head, they bear an extreme resemblance to Corrin. This further supports my theory that Corrin is the vessel for a dark god or dragon, which we now would assume to be Anankos. Also hidden is info on more dragons. When we see Corrin use Dragon Vein during the Nintendo Treehouse event, as well as the information trailer released in Japan, there are multiple other dragon or godlike images that appear. In fact, based on the octagon arrangement, I believe there will be 8 dragon or godlike creatures, and then 1 dragon king, or maybe 2 competing for the throne of a dragon king. We also now know that tribes exist, so the tribes could worship other dragons and gods than Hoshido, Nohr, and other tribes. We have confirmation that there's an ice tribe, a fire tribe. Who's to say that there's more tribes that worship different dragons? We also see other people use the Dragon Vein technique during the introduction trailer as well. It's very interesting though. Corrin has a different emblem that appears. Could the emblem change based on the action you are performing? Or change based on the character? Or maybe what route you choose? We have no idea what image means what. Also, remember that spell casted earlier in the trailer? Well, take a look at this. Do you recognize this image at his feet? Well, you might, because it's very similar to one of the images during the Dragon Vein animation. However, this spell is casted with a pentagon instead of an octagon. It kind of loosens the connection, but I still believe that magic in this game is going to be very connected to the gods. We also see imagery of these gods in other places. In fact, in the Hoshido capital, we can see an image of this dragon on the store stalls, as well as they have a giant mural of one right there in the center square. The connections to the gods are certainly gonna be running deep. Well, that's all I could dig from the trailer and surrounding information released during E3. This is most likely the final trailer we are receiving until it's released next week in Japan. After the Japanese release, I'm afraid I won't be able to make these videos, but I still plan on providing Fire Emblem Fates content, so don't fret. I don't speak Japanese, so I'm going to be in the dark as well as you guys when it comes out. I just want to avoid spoilers. But be free to leave your own theories in the comments or tweet them at me at Zukonima. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one.